Well, let me do a quick introduction of Kelly, and then she's going to talk to you about forest ecology and forest ecology with Kelly. So, so Kellyanne Malkowski is the park superintendent at Resaca de la Palma State Park. And she, with 5 years of service, she got her start with TPWD as a park interpreter educator at LBJ State Park in Stonewall, Texas, and then later moved to Resaca de la Palma. Currently, as park superintendent, she strives to maintain both a unique landscape and create outdoor activities for folks living in the RGV. Outside of work, she enjoys time spent outdoors with her family and loves a good true crime podcast. So you can ask her about that at the very end. So,
or share your Rex if you got any good murder-based podcasts.
Exactly.
I am Kelly. I have been at Resaca 4 years now, almost 2 years as the park superintendent. I'm excited to share with you my presentation about forest ecology. I am a fast talker, so if I'm talking too fast, please either tell me to slow down or ask me to repeat what I said. I have a couple of breaks built in for questions, but if you have like a burning one that's burning in your soul, I would personally rather answer it on that slide than circling back later, because my brain will be thinking about what we're talking about in that moment. Then at the end, I might not have as good of a response or an answer for you. I cannot see the chat, so if somebody could monitor that and let me know if any of those questions crop up while we're going. You're going to be doing that? Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Slide number 1. Forest ecology is a really, really big, broad stroke. So to kind of narrow that a little bit, I'm going to use the lens of forest succession and heat adaptations to drill in a little bit on forest ecology, because you're literally talking about every type of forest that can occur in the whole planet, and then everything that exists within that specific forest type. So that's a lot of information. That was a whole semester of college for me. So we're going to drill in a little bit and look through kind of a specific lens. But again, if you get those broad stroke questions later, more than happy to do my best to answer them. Just a little Montezuma cypress with some interesting cypress information, just for like a fun photo. So here's a visual representation of some of that information from the last slide. So if any of you folks have traveled to, say, the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, Canada, you've probably interacted with a tundra biome or a tundra forest type. Tundra and boreal forests are hand in hand. They operate very, very close to one another. As you get warmer, say you're from my home state, Illinois, or you grew up in Ohio, or maybe parts of Tennessee or Kentucky, you're going to be more in those temperate forests, maybe seeing some grasslands. If you're further out west, you're going to hit desert and chaparral. The desert would be at a lower elevation and the chaparral would be a little higher elevation. And when you drop to the bottom part of this pyramid, you get to us where we are now. We're a tropical, subtropical forest. We abut grassland, and if you go further west and you get hotter and drier, we'd hit those desert biome types. So I just thought this was a really handy infograph to distill what is a lot of information into some maybe more enjoyable bite-sized pieces. So where do we find this stuff? Where are these forest types at? This is a map of the world, of the globe. And if you see the purple, the Tamaulipan thorn scrub and woodland, you can see that right on the bottom part of a very poorly drawn North America. So you can see that, and it goes into Mexico, and we have some of those bright green dots of tropical seasonal forests. So you can see we're not the only place in the world, but we are a place that has a pretty good chunk of that habitat. And you can almost envision where the river is at, where the Rio Grande is. Texas is a huge, huge, huge state, and it holds 10 different distinct ecoregions. And in each of those ecoregions, you could have an incredible amount of habitat variation. When you look at the bottom of the map, you see that the Rio Grande Valley is either South Texas plains or Gulf Prairie marshlands. Resaca de la Palma kind of sits in both. So we have a little bit that I would say is kind of more Gulf prairies, and then we have some more that is maybe a little bit of that marshy habitat, and then very little that I would say is kind of like true plains. There's a lot. I am only really knowledgeable about the yellow part of Texas because I did not grow up in the state, and there's so much that I haven't got to explore yet. So if you ask me detailed questions about the piney woods or the Trans-Pecos, I might be like, let me Google that really quick and then verify some information before I respond. So where are we? So the RGV is a subtropical forest mixed in with Tamaulipan thorn scrub. You might hear that word thrown around quite a bit. Tamaulipan thorn scrub is just a really great way to describe that dense brush, thorny habitat that maybe you've had to pull your dog out of if they were chasing a rat, or you've had to like fish trash out of, and then your arm comes up all battered and scratched up. Very much indicative of the lower Rio Grande Valley. So let's talk about the valley as a place where humans live. So human impacts have greatly changed the Rio Grande Valley, but it's been a fairly recent change. So first European contact happened in 1519, and then for almost 400 years or so, it wasn't too much. So we're talking about very small towns with pretty low population base, subsistence farming, farming that you do to support your own little family or maybe an extended family, and a lot of animal agriculture that wasn't fenced. So those cows were either free ranging or constantly moved because of the impacts that they'd be having to the local grasses. Now in 1898, some really great engineers, some really interesting folks figured out how to flood irrigate the Rio Grande Valley. So they were like, oh, this is a great, powerful river. Let's do something with all of this water resource. How can we grow more food and support more people? And then in 1904, you got good water for growing stuff, and then a railroad for bringing humans in and then products out. And that's when we really saw the boom. So that boom grew Brownsville from Fort Brown into the city of Brownsville, grew Harlingen, McAllen, Edinburgh into actual cities instead of small little towns. And what happens when a lot of people move into a forested place? We can see, deforestation. So that's what happened here in the Rio Grande Valley. So about 95% of the original habitat was greatly altered and disturbed. So it was either slash and burn, clear cut. By that point, you did have some mechanical means of removing vegetation from the surface. And in their place, row crops and pasture land were created for cows and crops. People have to eat. The valley was a really good place to grow those things. Now, for the Rio Grande Valley specifically, what I'm going to be speaking about tonight is mostly our human impacts on the habitat of the Rio Grande Valley, but it's not just us. There are plenty of things that can cause deforestation or massive disturbances to a landscape. So a cute creature that does a lot of change, and not necessarily good or bad, we'll just say change, are beavers. So not something that we see so much here, but beaver families do a similar clear-cutting action that can initiate or press pause or move forward some stage of forest succession. We can have fire events, we can have mudslides. Large volcanic events can also stimulate and start the process of forest succession. So these are the stages of forest succession. We go from our friendly pioneer plants, we get our perennial plants and grasses, and we see some shrubs, woody pioneers, short-lived tree species, and then a climax forest. And I have slides that will take us through each step of this process, each individual little clump. I have probably said the word forest 47 times so far, and it's only been about 10 minutes. But what even makes up a forest? When we hear that word, it's a little more complex than just like a nice stroll in the woods. So the infograph on the left gives you a pretty detailed breakdown, going all the way down to the geological substrate For us, we don't have a lot of exciting geological features. For the most part, anything cool geology-wise was washed into the ocean thousands of years ago or was covered by the ocean in a similar effect. So when we talk about our soil and our deep soil, it's mostly a caliche base. And then in that we get our root base, then your forest floor, you can have your understory. The understory can be made of either juvenile plants of the same parent tree type, or it can be different shrubs, lower canopy, that mid canopy, and then our upper canopy that provides the most amount of shading. Impacts to any layer will affect the whole. So if we think about, say, a fire in the piney woods where there's a lot of understory buildup, well, then that's going to correlate to a lot more tree burning. But if there's not a lot of understory, it's a well-maintained, well-managed forest, then you're not going to get that canopy burn. And that's the drastic type of fire that just really burns through. The Rio Grande Valley, fire is not a huge part of our local ecology. It's definitely a management tool that land managers here in the Rio Grande Valley take advantage of because it's a great way to reduce those fuels, and it's a fairly cheap way. The other, like if you don't do fire, then you're going to do mechanical removal with tractors and shredders and bulldozers and discs and blades, and all of that is very spendy, where a fire will do much of that work for just some time and manpower. So let's talk about our friendly pioneering species. So we had that big event, either us as humans, we clear cut, or say I just moved to the Rio Grande Valley, I bought a property, it's 10 acres, what can I do to try to get this habitat back to what it would have been 100+ years ago? So you would do a little look-see, you would look around, and maybe you would see the flower with a purple leaf is a silverleaf nightshade. If any of you grow tomatoes, that flower might look similar. It has a fruit that looks like a tiny tomato. They're cousin plants, but silverleaf nightshade are pretty toxic. You don't want to handle them too much, and you definitely don't want to eat its fruiting body. On the bottom, with that sunny yellow face, is a mallow. Mallows are incredibly tolerant. It's harder to kill a mallow than it is to get one started. And once you have them, then they're everywhere. And then we have a cute little blue stem grass. This is a little blue stem grass. If we would have been here in 1519, this would have been a predominant grass. When we looked across those grass prairies in the South Texas plains, we would have seen a lot of these little blue stem grasses. Now, because it is 2022 and humans have been heavily impacting the Rio Grande Valley, ooh, you're right, beetles do love the silverleaf nightshade. We don't see much of the native grasses. We do not see a lot of our natives, and what we do see are all these gross guys. None of them get A+. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about any of them. The first plant is a Guinea grass. If you've ever been weeding a garden and the grass is 6 feet tall, it's generally the Guinea grass. Next, we have King Ranch blue stem. Again, doing that weeding in the weeds, the grass is running along the ground. It's that KR blue stem. And then the most tolerable of all of these is a buffle grass because they're a little easier to manage and a little more supportive to our native plants. Technically, all of these can be considered a bunch grass, but the issue is that they bunch very tightly. If we go back to our little blue stem, and this has clearly been graced, you see the space in between them. So if you have space between grasses, you have little micro highways. So you have room if you are a quail, you have room if you are a rat or a rabbit or a mouse or a vole. This grass, very, very thick, very, very dense. It is a pioneering species, but it's about the worst type that you can have. Every bird and nature site in the Rio Grande Valley fights this. I have probably 350 acres of the park. The park itself, 1,200 acres. So of that is this invasive grasses. And to revegetate in native grasses is a definitely very near and dear project that we would love to support and do, but it's expensive. And it's probably going to take 3 to 5 years before we would even really know if it worked, if they actually would be self-sustaining, or if it would be a project that would need to be babied for forever. So keep an eye out for them. Only like There are some benefits to livestock. So cows are pretty tolerant of it. Goats will eat it really well. There's a little bit of research that quail will eat the KR blue stem seeds, but even then they probably would have done better with a native blue stem grass instead of these. So we had our pioneers, our original group. That stage can last a while. So forest succession, in the picture I showed you, was linear. So it was the graph going up with the different vegetation and time. I looked really, really hard for a stair step of forest succession, because that, I think, is a much better representation of what happens. So we could have that big event that clears everything out, and then we could start, say, stage 1 with our pioneers. And maybe the conditions never change. It never gets any better. We keep having impacts, and it stays pretty steady with those pioneer species, building up a seed bank, and they just circle through. But if the pioneers come, they cycle through, and conditions have improved, then we start seeing perennial plants, plants that are either going to live for several years or they're going to come back every year. I picked these 4 because I think they're pretty. I really enjoy them. They're personal favorites, so that's why I included them. We have a Texas lantana, a skeleton leaf goldeneye, a blue shrubby sage, and then a Texas purple sage or a cenizo. Again, these are plants that are still fairly drought tolerant and fairly heat tolerant. Everything in the Rio Grande Valley needs to have those 2 features if they want to survive. You've got to be able to sustain yourself during long periods of drought, and you need to be pretty tolerant to long, high sustained heat. And all of these plants make that cut. Now, keeping with that stair step, if conditions are good, all of these plants can step up into that next stage of succession. They're happy being small perennial plants, but say we have 2 or 3 really good wet years, they're going to get big. If any of you have those cenizos in your yard, you know that they require care. You have to trim them or give them haircuts, or else you have these big, huge shrubberies that you can't see around. So they can transition into our shrubby friends. So for me, this is one of my favorite stages. This is the awkward teenage years. This is that haircut you got that you thought was going to look super cute, and now it's grown out and you're like, what was I thinking? And this stage, we've gotten past bare earth. We've had those grasses in. We have our smaller perennial plants starting to build a floor and some of our understory. And then we get to our shrubs. So the bottom 2 photos, we have granjeño, or like the spiny hackberry. It produces that orange berry that maybe you see. That berry is really productive for a lot of creatures. So birds eat a lot of them. Small mammals will consume them. Beside it is a Spanish dagger or a yucca. Those flowers are an important food source for humans, also really great pollinator. But it's the top 2 that I want to talk about. So the top 2 are trees that sort of get a lot of hate. So the one on the right is a honey mesquite, and then the one on the left is a huizache. A lot of folks, those trees are interchangeable. I have folks at the park will be like, oh yeah, that's a huizache. And I'm like, that's actually a mesquite. Or they're like, that's a mesquite. And I'm like, that's a huizache. They look very similar, and their behavior in a forest system or an ecotype really depends on what happens to them when they're small plants. So if you are a small mesquite or a small huizache and you go through a traumatic event, a cow ate you, you got trampled under somebody's feet, a lawnmower mowed you over, there was a really bad drought event, you might not survive that. But if you do, you're going to be a shrub. You're going to stay slower, closer to the ground. You're going to run out more. You're going to have a lot more limbs that are thinner and smaller. All of those things kind of help to protect you from more stress further down the line. So you're a little more wind tolerant. You're a little more heat tolerant. If you're shorter to the ground and shrubbier, you can take advantage of a little bit more of that condensation that's going to happen. But there are sections in my park where you can come and you can see this mixed habitat, where you can look out across the landscape, especially on some of our tree lines that aren't as far along as other places. My park tried to do a reforestation project about 50 years ago. And where we are now in 2022, we should be getting closer to a mature forest type, and we're still stuck in teenage land. The park and the valley have gone through so many of those drought cycles that the trees didn't really establish, and there's still a significant amount of understory. In these pictures, you can still see a significant amount of grass, and that's telling you that it's not very far along. It hasn't developed all of those features that it would need to be an immature juvenile forest or further along as a mature. Okay, so these are our young tree friends. Again, I have more pictures of Huisache and mesquites. So these two had perfect childhood. Like it went really, really well for them. These are both clearly cultivated, tended trees. So they, I would assume that somebody watered them, somebody pruned them, gave them everything they need, maybe fertilized them. So they were able to grow single trunks straight and true. We see this in the park. You see this across the valley. There are some of these mesquites that had all of their needs met, some of these huisaches that had all of their needs met, and they grow. The bottom right tree is a tepehuaje or a great lead tree. They're a little bit unique and special because they actually grow pretty tall. This is one of the few valley trees outside of that Montezuma cypress that'll break that 30-foot mark. Pretty much everywhere and everyone else in the whole forest is going to stay 30 feet or shorter. Again, that's a really handy heat adaptation. But tepehuajes don't. And they're also incredibly short-lived. They are the fastest die-off tree that we have in the park that you really see in the Rio Grande Valley. They live fast, they grow fast. Usually by about 30 years old, they're in decline. And then our fourth tree, another beautiful, lovely tree, and again, a little bit atypical, is a Mexican olive. I say they're a little atypical because they have a big broad leaf, and a broad leaf tends to mean that you're going to lose more water through photorespiration, but they have some different adaptations that help to protect them from that. So these are our young guys, our young friends that are going to enrich the soil. So mesquite, huisache, and tepehuaje are all cousins. They're all in the Fabiaceae family. They're all related, and they're all nitrogen fixers. One of the best trees we can have in the forest to improve soil quality. So say we had a big flood event and it sat and the water leached out a lot of the nutrients in the soil. Those three are going to fix that nitrogen, and they're going to offer some protection to the plants that are within their radius. So those plants are going to have greater access to those micronutrients in the soil than, say, a plant that is not near, that's not exposed to their nitrogen fixing. If it has, sorry about that, a big long seed pod, it's probably in the pea family. So if you see it, you're like, that reminds me of a green bean or string pea. They're fixing nitrogen. That's why snow peas are such a common cover crop, is because it's enriching that soil without the farmer having to pay for nitrogen. And then they get like a double whammy because then they can also take that product to market. All right, now it's the bruisers. These are the mob bosses of the forest. These are our dominant mature tree types, and they are some of the least tolerant of anybody else hanging out in their understory, and they have some limited tolerance for each other. So moving from left to right, I have a sugar hackberry, then I have a Mexican ash, then an anaqua, and then an ebony. So ebonies and anaqua get along pretty good. Their leaf litter that they drop is tolerable to both species. Their mycorrhizomes that are in the soil get along. But if you say, oh, I'm a Mexican ash and I'm going to hang out by this ebony, it's not going to work because ebony trees do secrete a toxin in their mycorrhizomes that make them very competitive. And you see that in a lot of plant species. Going back to mesquite and huisache, they don't. They're like, yeah, anybody can come hang out with us. Here, the soil's great. These are like, no, don't come here. This is not for you. This is for me and my family and my children and my grandchildren, but not you. Couple of exceptions that we can see or find to that rule is when you have mature old growth forest types that are then being infested with non-native species. So you might be like, oh, well, it's mature. How is that happening? We see in the Rio Grande Valley, seed dispersion is happening through wind events. Super windy today, all sorts of stuff is going to get moved around. Flooding events. So anytime the valley floods, seeds are being picked up and then deposited. And then our most common culprit, they're being pooped out. So coyotes will eat almost anything, opportunistic omnivore. So they might exit the park, go to somebody's neighborhood, eat a non-native seed, bring it back and poop it. Or birds. Birds are doing a very similar action. And when you run a seed through a digestive tract, that makes it germinate so much better. So the reason why there are mesquites all across the state of Texas is because cows carried them in their guts. And that pile of manure was the perfect cradle for those trees to get established. So we have a section of the park where we have a large Mexican ash tree. It's one of my favorite trees in the park. It's grand, it's stately. Mexican ashes are one of our few deciduous trees in the Rio Grande Valley, as opposed to a lot of the evergreens we see. But it does not do a good job of keeping out Brazilian pepper. So Brazilian pepper is a non-native tree. It's an attractive ornamental. That's why people brought it in. It's now at almost infestation levels at lots of places. When we see it in the park, it's an immediate, either a mechanical removal or a chemical application. But these trees did not come up at the same time, evolve at the same time, have those competing defense mechanisms. So when we see them, we have to do the work of what, in general, the rhizomes would have done, or the shading from the forest canopy would have taken care of. Alrighty, so we're back to that original graph. So we talked about our pioneer plants, we talked about our perennials, we moved through our shrubs, our short-lived, and then our climax forests. Does anybody have any questions about either any of the plants I mentioned or any of the stages, or observations that you feel are suitable that might add more clarification for the group? Oh, okay. Mostly it's going to be size. So a bunch of little blue stem is going to stay like fairly small, and it again stays fairly short, and it kind of, oh man. So it kind of elbows like this. So if you put your elbows together, it's a little tighter at the base and a little wider at the top. I hope you enjoyed that visual representation. Whereas the King Ranch blue stem, the bunches get huge. It still surprises me when I see it listed as a bunch grass, because to me it's a mat grass. It makes a mat. It makes a dense mat that nothing can really traverse through. That's a big reason why I don't think that I have very many quail in the park. I almost never see quail. We have really good, should have good quail habitat, but there's no places for their little bodies to move through that thick mat of grass. Grasses, I think, are arguably the hardest plant to identify. To this day, I still find them immensely challenging, so I don't feel like enough of an authority to challenge whoever made that decision, but I agree to disagree with them on that designation. And I've only ever seen little blue stem in pictures. So except for one trip I made to the Powderhorn Ranch, which is going to be a new Texas state park, where I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure that's little blue stem. I've yet to see it in person with my own eyeballs in the Rio Grande Valley. I imagine there's some sites here that have it, and I just haven't been there yet. But it's nowhere near as common as it would have been in 1850. You would have been a vaquero riding range in the early 1800s. It probably would have been a pretty common grass. But through our human enterprise, we installed these non-native grasses that were supposed to be better range plants, more digestible, higher calorie for cattle, and it just didn't work out the way we thought it would. And now I, almost 100 years later, get to figure out, how do we fund a grassland restoration project? How do we restore this to what wasn't really seen as valuable 100 plus years ago? So I don't want folks to be completely heartbroken or disheartened. We have lost a lot, but what brings me a lot of hope is that there's good awareness and people are willing to do the work. So Rio Reforestation is a big initiative that U.S. Fish and Wildlife does. They do a project every year. I don't know that they've done reforestation in the last 2 years because of COVID, but in 2019, they planted almost 200,000 plants. And what I think is phenomenal is when you know better, you do better. So my park, a reforestation project took place in 1974. I would argue mostly failed. Now, when they do these projects, they plant the plant and then they install tubing around it, and that tubing collects condensate. These trees are no longer as reliant on rain. So condensation pools in these tubes and that's watering them. So that first year being planted is the most pivotal time. If they can have decent water in that first year of life, there's a good chance they're actually going to grow and survive the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark, and make it through those stages. A reforestation project, you're circumventing like stage 1, 2. You're just trying to get to stage 3 or 4 of those young plants. And we do so much better now. We're so much more successful at these projects than we were even 50 years ago. So I have high hopes in the next 50 years that maybe instead of that 95% that gets thrown around, maybe it'll be 92% or 90%, or maybe we can get it down to 85% of habitat is missing from the Rio Grande Valley. So U.S. Fish, they've been pivotal. They've done so much work. The Apache Tree Grant, I imagine some of you are going to end up at sites that are going to need plants, or they're going to need the funding to get plants. The Apache Tree Grant program is phenomenal. My park has partnered with them. You reach out through their grant application and then they give you trees. They get you really great trees. Edinburgh last year got 250 to help mitigate some of their freeze loss. So it's a really, really cool program. They did 10,000 trees in South Texas in 2016. And then the American Forest group, they did about 20,000. So we've lost a lot, but there are plenty of people who have the hunger in them to try to fix what's missing. Okay, let's talk about heat adaptations. To me, heat adaptations walk hand in hand with forest management, with what we see in the Rio Grande Valley, how we as humans can act as land managers. So when we look at trees specifically, we see their canopy. Generally, kind of rule of thumb, you can take what you see above ground and you're going to put it out and spread it around under the ground. So the image or the trees I would draw as a child, where I'd have like 4 little roots in the ground, and that's what was anchoring the tree and helping the tree get nutrients and resources. Nope, it's a big mass. And as the research has persisted, it's mostly surface. So a lot of our root systems are pretty close to the surface, and that's why that surface level disturbance is something that we should think about. If we're hiking on a trail, staying on that trail because that's protecting those delicate roots from damage. The more roots you have, the wider they are, the longer they reach, the better your access is to those water resources. We don't have a ton of groundwater. We also don't get a ton of rain. So how do we make use of what we do have? All across the board, on a multitude of plants, you see teeny tiny leaves. So a really, really small leaf generally means that you have a very, very small stoma. The stomas are kind of comparable to pores, except they're doing all of the respiration. So our lungs are bringing the oxygen in. We process that. For a plant, they're doing photorespiration through their leaves and their stomas to bring that oxygen in, or bring that carbon dioxide in, and then release that oxygen. So if you've been hiking and then maybe something brambly caught your shirt or caught your skin and you're bleeding a little bit, and then you turn back and you notice a cute little pink flower and wilting leaves, you're like, what's going on with that? You've hit a Zarza or a touch me not. This one is a little bit interesting and peculiar because it can't quite pin down why that plant expresses that behavior. So there's some thought that the leaves are curling in response to like a wind event or a change in pressure to prepare themselves for, oh, water is coming, we can start funneling this towards ourselves. That little bit, the mechanics is still being figured out, but I just think it's super cool to watch. And if you're ever on a hike with kids and you touch it and they get to watch it, it really gives that touch me not, and then you reinforce, hey, the thorns are thorny. I have a palm frond. That's a palm frond from a sable palm. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. So if you see a turned palm, that tends to be the sables, and they have a large vein that runs down the center of the frond. Again, a cool activity if you're leading a group is to pour some water onto that frond, and it shunts all the water down to the trunk and then from the trunk to the ground. That design of that frond makes them better suited to the Rio Grande Valley because, again, condensation or rain is drawing them down. The valley is full of palms. You see palms all across the board. Our sables are the only ones that are native. The other really common one are the Washingtonians, but they give you more of a high five, or you can see the dates that have a longer palm frond. Any questions about heat adaptations? Cool. So I put together some RGV fast facts. If some of y'all are not from the Rio Grande Valley, even if you are, I still think they're fun. So throughout the year, we can see about 500-ish bird species. I added the ish because this year, first time ever in America, we got a bout falcon. So that bumps it up. So that number is subject to change. It could change it at any point. We could get something tonight with the wind or see it tomorrow. 230-ish butterfly species, about 1,200 different types of plants, 200 vertebrates. So those are mammals. I guess y'all had mammalogy before you did forest ecology with me. And then the Rio Grande Valley generates about $460-ish million a year in ecotourism. So drawing folks in from all across the world to see. And if we didn't have the habitat, if we don't have the forest, if we're not supporting these activities, if we're not doing good land management or thoughtful land management or reforestation projects, then there won't be anything to see. So by protecting that habitat, that gives a little bit of an economic incentive to keep doing what we're doing. Is there a question? Maybe just a hot mic. Y'all, I talked way too fast. That's my biggest weakness. When I prepped this earlier and ran through, I was right on time, but now I'm a little too quick. So we have plenty of time for questions if y'all have questions. These are the resources, just some interesting stuff. So the USGS put together a really very, very thoughtful report on biodiversity in the Rio Grande Valley and species of concerns and plants of concerns. They did that in 2016. There are some really cool USGS projects that are happening across the Rio Grande Valley, especially in regards to Resaca and Resaca management. It's 123 pages long. So if that is the sort of stuff that interests you, and I have read it and it is super interesting, please feel free to do a deep dive. The Lady Bird Johnson Center for Wildflowers, I think that's a great resource. If I've been in a pickle, if I've seen something, I'm like, man, I'm not quite sure what I'm debating. Which grass is this? It's pretty quick and easy to get to, very user-friendly. The Texas invasive species list, really, really good. They go across the board. Everything that's invasive to the state of Texas, to my knowledge, that is known, is on there. And then my information about how the Rio Grande Valley has changed came from the Texas State Historical Association. But the original spot that really got my brain thinking about that is the Museum of South Texas History in Edinburgh. If you have the chance to go, I thought it was really cool, and it brings a lot of the history of the valley and a lot of like why we call it the valley, why it's the Magic Valley, why there's citrus, why some of the places are named the way they're named, or why streets are the way they are. It's a super, super cool site, and I encourage everybody to go, as well as come and see me in my park. And if you do want to see forest succession in real life, every piece that I talked about, if we were doing these things in person, I would have taken you to in the park so you could see it in real time. Like most places, my park is a mosaic, an ever-changing mosaic of things. So there are parts that are old growth, mature forest, parts that are of concern. I have a grassland, and it's slowly succumbing to forest succession. So we can see the adverse effect where we would like to press pause or stop to maintain some open grassland habitat to support those grassland species.
I do encourage everyone to visit your park. It's a very nice place, and if they get you to take them on and we'll see, maybe we can set that up. You take them on the tree walk, like.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You still need to work on your enthusiasm and everything, but
Yeah, no, I get that all the time.
totally kidding. I always love the way you present and you talk about, I don't know, you're just so excited about everything.
Well, what's super cool to me is I didn't grow up here. So all the time it's something new. All the time I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know that. Oh wow, look at this cool plant. Whereas like where I grew up, I can be like, oh yeah, look at this. This is the state record holder cypress tree. Like it's so much easier for me to be excited here because it's still so fresh. This is my 5th winter in the Rio Grande Valley, and I still feel like I learn new stuff all of the time. My park changes literally every day. Okay, so for example, for the first time in 3 years, we have a ton of castor bean, tons of it just growing up all over the place, and we haven't had this problem. So now I'm like tramping into parts of the park where I've never had to walk before to deal with this castor bean. I'm like, look at this beautiful little mallow. I didn't even know you were here. Or what is that? Who are you? Are you a baby? Are you a plant I don't know? Let me figure this out. What's this snail? Like, I don't want anybody to ever lose that spirit of adventure or being excited about even the smallest little thing. We might not have megafauna like they do in the north, but we do have tons and tons of super, super cool stuff that only occurs here. It's so unique. We're one of the most unique ecotypes in the entire world. So I'm super happy to be a transplant to the RGV. Hopefully not an invasive species like that castor bean.
Oh, well, you really set up. I'm doing 2 plant walks at Ramsey tomorrow, so you really set me up well because I'll be able to point out numerous things that you discussed. And tell me again, what is it that causes things? What did you say ebonies do that makes
So
things happen?
all plants have their roots, and in their roots are microrhizomes. So microrhizomes are how plants can communicate with one another. The more we study plants, the more we're learning that they're sending a lot of chemical signals through those roots as a warning, as a get prepared. So some rhizomes are tolerant only to themselves. So if you are an ebony tree, you're pretty tolerant of your own rhizome. So if you're a young ebony, you're going to tolerate that pretty well. But if you're something else, not so much. So when you do see those sections of old growth ebony trees, between their rhizomes, their leaf litter, and those seed pods, all of that material crushes out anything else in the understory. But it doesn't work that way for everybody, because if you're a mesquite tree, you don't really care. You're like, whatever, everybody come to the party, come hang out. I got a deep taproot. I'm not that worried about resources.
Okay, then what does Brazilian pepper do?
So, to my knowledge, Brazilian pepper is just tolerant to everybody's stuff. So none of their schemes, none of their pheromones or the chemicals that are releasing are that abhorrent to them. So they're like, nope, I'm fine. This is fine.
But doesn't it prevent things from growing under it?
Oh yeah, so it only works one direction. So their stuff is really strong against what's native here, but our natives are not able to combat that very well. That's what makes them so much more aggressive, is that unique factor where they have that pheromone, that chemical receptor, that chemical output that our natives don't, so they can't repel them as easily as, say, they could repel each other or repel another plant species that they had co-evolved with.
Yeah, they're nasty plants.
Gross. Yep. Castor bean is awful. I've never done so much castor bean removal as I have in the last couple of weeks.
I have a question for you on the trees and the root systems.
Sure.
I had a dear friend that his dad left him farmland, probably hadn't been farmed in 25, 30 years. He took his D5 cat out there, and I know there was ebony trees, mesquite, a few oak trees, and he was trying to clear it to start farming again. As he went over the mesquites, they came up fine. The oaks came up fine. He broke his neck when he ran into the ebony tree. It did not budge. We tried everything in the world, and this ebony tree was probably 3 foot or better around, and a D5 cat would not even budge it. And all these trees were in the same 200-acre area. Why do these trees, the root system that strong on an ebony tree?
So ebonies have really, really strong heartwood, and they also have a low level of brittleness. So a mesquite tree is a pretty strong tree, but they're also very brittle. So an analogy I've heard is like raw steel versus tempered steel. So an ebony tree is tempered. It has very, very strong heartwood, and it's not as brittle. Whereas a mesquite tree, especially if they've had time to like dry out, they become much more brittle over time, and they are a little easier to remove. So mesquite, you can crunch, but that ebony, you're going to saw. We've been doing some tree trimming, and if you come to the park right now and you'll look, and you can see that deep, dark heartwood in the center of those trees. That's why they tend to do a little bit better in these big wind events, because they don't have that same level of brittleness that you see in a mesquite tree, which is also what we think of as a pretty tough wood.
That's the thing. When we were doing it with the cat, the mesquite tree roots and all would turn up because it seemed very shallow. So with the oaks, but this ebony, matter of fact, you can go out there today. He's been farming now for 10 years. He's got 5 ebony trees in the middle of his field. I mean,
a lot of times you have to come from the top with the grinder, but even that sometimes won't do it, because it depends on how old and how dead they are. If there's they might even still be resistant. That's the number one thing that dulls our saw blades. We go through so many more chainsaw blades when we have to do ebony tree trimming versus everything else. You bring spares on those days.
Thank you.
Other questions for Kelly? Other comments?
Talked too fast. That's the Illinois part of me that I just can't shake. I can't get the like, hey, slow down. I'm like, nope, 100 words a minute.
But you don't talk so fast that we can't understand you or anything. It's just you're just enthusiastic. That's the great part about your presentations. So thank you for spending your evening with us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to.
Don't blow off the road on your way home.
Right. Hopefully my big boat of a truck just stays nice and in the center.
Oh, wait, Barbara says there's a question in the.
Yeah. So live oak is more of a cultivar. So we're really outside of the range. So when you look at that map of Texas, you get the live oaks down into like Brooks County, a little bit in like the top part of Hidalgo, but deep, we're a little too hot and dry for them. They would prefer a little more moisture. So to my knowledge, I don't think that any oak species is native to the Rio Grande Valley. I'd have to double check that fact, and I encourage you to fact check me on that. but I think live oaks are not a native species to like Cameron, Willacy, Hidalgo, Starr counties. Because we have ebonies, because we have hackberries and Mexican ash trees, there's already something that was in that niche. But people sure do like to plant them, and I think that's why you see them coming down so often, is they're just not as well adapted to the area as some other things.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice?
Yep, gotta polish up that attitude. A little too snarky, right?
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help. And again, if y'all are interested in in-person field trips, just let me know. If I'm not sure if y'all are back to that yet, but I'd love to show you it in real time. And sometimes I do think it makes a difference to see it in person versus seeing it through a screen.
We are back to in-person field. Outside field trips, we feel like are safe. And we just don't have, several people asked me why we weren't meeting in person for our classes. And we actually don't have a good place to meet because we lost the room. It was too small anyway, the AgriLife classroom. But so the classes online actually, in many cases, I think work better because people can sit in their office or their home office, whichever, and talk to us and not have to drive here. So
Sure.
but some people have to drive home now, and that's you.
No big deal.
Just stay off, just stay on the road because of the wind. So
Yep. I'm excited to see what the park looks like tomorrow. Part of me is like, please don't let stuff get ripped down. Please let everything still be up.
Oh yeah, we've been watching. We have a couple of those Tepawahis and
Yep. They're
mesquite.
They're just the worst. They cannot take it. They're crybabies.
Yeah.
They get bullied by the wind just a little bit and they collapse.
Yeah, after every big wind event, there's branches out there in the yard. So okay, well, thanks again.
Yep. Thanks. Appreciate y'all.
We appreciate you. Good night.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Okay. Well, we're going to go through a few more slides here, and then we'll, looks like maybe we'll get out a little early if you guys don't have too many questions, but either way, it's still going to be the same, the full length. You can still count the full length. As Tom mentioned, Dr. Klein from UTRGV is our speaker next time. Ichthyology is his subject. He does a lot of really interesting research. He's done, I think it's basically his project, or he's the one that researches it, the artificial reef that they have put out at off the island, and that's really interesting. And so he'll talk to us about fish, and I'm sure people will have a lot of questions. Then we have Coastal Ecology with Shelby Bissett, the program manager at the Coastal Studies Lab, and she's one of our members. So one thing I wanted to mention, and you all got an email about this. This is an optional training class, and it's put together by Dr. Megan Clayton, who's Tony Reisinger knows her, really good assistant professor of extension range specialist at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. And so I've been to some of these, and they're very good. I've not been to this one, but we're going to be at this one. If you do register and go to it, just take a snapshot of the screen so we know you were there, and we'll be online looking for you as well if you can go. So I would suggest that, and that'll be for class credit. Okay, tomorrow, this is who I have signed up. If you want to come to either one of these and you haven't signed up, just show up or shoot me a text or whatever. There's no, we'll leave the parking lot at, we'll gather in the parking lot at 9 and then the second one at 1. And it's a big circle. So if you see our cars there, if you get there a few minutes late, text me and I'll explain how to get to where we are. So we're gonna walk around, and yes, Sherry just asked, are they the same? No two tours I do are ever exactly the same. It's not, I don't have a script where I talk about this plant and this plant, you know, I talk about based on the season, based on what's in bloom, based on what's going on. But between 9 and 1, there's not probably going to be a lot of difference. But like I said, each one is a little different. And so I would not want to listen to me. Even Robert doesn't want to listen to me. Well, he's probably got more reason not to want to listen to me. But two on the same day, I wouldn't suggest. So I did see, Sherry, you said that you will come at 1. Very good. Yes, okay, great. Then, so that's anybody else that wants to come. Like I said, if you want to show up, if you don't know where, just Google Hugh Ramsey Nature Park. And it's right off of Loop 499 in Harlingen. Then on Saturday, we're going to have a class field trip to the South Texas Ecotourism Center. And if you don't know the address, we'll post it. It's right off of Route 100. And so that is from 9 to 11. And then in the afternoon, we have booked an eco trip with the Osprey. And if you'd like to come, please let me know tonight. When we scheduled it on the whatever day we scheduled it for, that it was too cold, we scheduled it for a few more people. But if so, let me know if you want to come, and and so I can let them know. And it's not any cost to you. We're picking up the cost. So so those two are Saturday. Then the 26th, which is a Saturday, we have Coastal Studies Lab from 9 to 11. And that is in, what's the park as you go off, when you come into the island, take a right?
Isla Blanca.
Isla Blanca, thank you. My brain just froze. Isla Blanca, it's in Isla Blanca. In the past, and I forgot to check with Shelby, but in the past, we gave her a list of the people coming to the field trip. She then gave it to the gate operators, and they let you in free. So you have to let us know if you're coming to this in order to get into the park free, because they look at that list and they say, okay, oh no, you're not on the list. So that one is, and we'll be sending out a reservation form for that. But that's in the morning, and I believe Tony's going to be showing us some things on the beach.
Yes, we're going to pull a seine, so wear tennis shoes so your feet can get wet.
Okay, very good. And then in the afternoon, we were thinking there's a new project that is going to be going on, a SPI pollinator garden at the convention center. And we thought we could meet over there, and we haven't even asked Laura if she'd be willing to show you around, but Laura Tyndall, one of your classmates, is the project manager on this, and or leader, project leader. But we thought we could look around there, do some iNaturalist training, and maybe even pull a few invasives out. So, oh yes, very good. I'm glad. Laura says she's excited. After she picked herself off of the floor, she said she's excited. No, we were hoping. We thought that'd be a good way for you to see it, and since we'll be out on the island for the other field trips, so those two are the 26th. And then this one just came up today. The Camp Rio previously was Camp Lulu Sam's, and was purchased by Idea School, and it wasn't open to the public, but we have had several of their employees go through our training, and we were invited today to have a field trip to their location to see the outdoor education that they provide. And so it hasn't, there's not more detail to this yet. This just happened. This invitation to us just came this morning. So we'll be keeping you posted on that, but that should be interesting. And it's in Brownsville, and it's on Fitch Hatchery Road. And so this project on the left says Fish Trails is one that we've been working on for about a year. And it's right down, it's on the same road as Camp Rio. So we figured we could stop there, sort of tell you a little bit about what we've been doing there, and then proceed on down to Camp Rio. And the last field trips we have scheduled, which we don't haven't been able to reschedule with Rolando yet, to go to Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma battlefields, but he's got a lot going on right now and had his big boss in town, so he said he'd get back with me with potential dates. And then we're scheduled to go to Cactus Creek Ranch April 9th. Cactus Creek is out very close to Laguna Atascosa. Mark Conway, who's banded over 20,000 birds in the valley, is going to be banding birds out there, and we'll be able to watch and learn about how that happens. And we're working on seeing if there's a way we can take you all to Laguna Atascosa. And I think that's the last slide. So, questions?
I have a question about the boat ride. Where are you all going? In the bay somewhere?
We usually meet right around where Pier, what is it, Pier 19, where Sea Ranch is. That's where Osprey Cruises takes off. And from there, they typically will take us out into the Laguna Madre, take us up along the fishing channel out towards the Port of Brownsville, not that far. But it's a good opportunity to get out onto the water if you haven't been out there before. Chances are really good we'll see dolphins. They'll typically, if the weather permits, they'll drag a net at the bottom so we can see some of the critters and other life that live in the Laguna Madre. So that's what we're shooting for.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
There's a question on chat if we will see Bird Island. If you're talking about Green Island, that's over towards Ports Mansfield. And we're not going to go that far. We are looking into a field trip to Port Mansfield to go see the East Ranch and what they do out there. We're still planning on that one.
And if you notice, Ed put the address for the Ecotourism Center, 501 West State Highway 100. in Laguna Vista. Sorry if I interrupted somebody. More
Yeah.
comments, questions?
I'm just wondering if you've been able to list all these great opportunities on the events calendar on the website on Facebook.
As far as these field trips for the
Yes.
class,
Yes.
we tend to announce them to the class, and that way we're not confusing the entire chapter that these are chapter field trips. So we
Okay.
try to keep them separate.
Okay. It would just help somebody like me to remember them.
What I'll do is I'll write them up on an email that I can share, and we'll update it and
Wonderful.
continue to send that out to everybody. But I
Wonderful.
agree. I need to make sure that we get this information to you in something else other than this slideshow.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly.
Great.
And that's, Robert has a good point, and that is like most of these, and not all, but most of these opportunities are for the class. Like I said earlier, if you were on, Ed is making the South Texas Ecotourism Center available to the class. It doesn't even open. It's not having its grand opening until the 22nd. He's allowing the class to come for a field trip on Saturday, and he's offered it to our chapter on Sunday. So we're glad you joined this chapter, Ed. But so there are field trip opportunities for the entire chapter, and then there's field trips that are only offered for the class. So thank you for asking that question. Yes, thank you, Ed. We're so excited. We hope we're not making it too difficult for you and your job. Okay. We're driving you crazy.
Not at all. No, it's our pleasure. I'm excited to have everybody there. It's a wonderful facility.
And we're excited to see it.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, what does this say?
So there's a question about whether you can go to the field trips that are offered to the whole chapter. You certainly can. But we have the South Texas Eco Center on Saturday for the class, on Sunday for the chapter. You can attend both, but you can get credit for only one. So certainly come out. What we're trying to do is make sure that you guys get to bond as a class. It's a unique opportunity. It's a unique adventure that you guys are starting together. But we certainly do want you to meet the rest of our chapter. And so definitely we'll hold these two types of events, and you're welcome to both.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that and asking that question.
By the way, just to sort of pique your interest, we are working with Mark to see if he will let us as a class help him on one of his unique bird banding events. So he has access to some of the remote locations in Laguna Tascosa, places that we just cannot go. And he needs a lot of help to manually, if you've ever seen those movies where people form a picket line and try to scare the tiger out for the hunter that's waiting for him on the other side, that's kind of what we have to do to catch these seaside sparrows that are unique to the valley, unique to this one location at Laguna Tascosa. And so it's a really neat opportunity to see what Laguna Tascosa is like, as well as see Mark band it's a species he discovered. And he's constantly trying to monitor where they live, how many they are they losing their habitat? And it's just a really unique opportunity. So as we secure that date and time, we'll let you know. But I will warn you, you're walking through muck and brush with other critters that you've already been exposed to, including rattlesnakes. So it'll be an adventure, and we'll let you know more about that when we get close to securing that date. It'll be fun.
We've gone with him several times, and it's it's extremely unique, and you're way the heck out in the part of Laguna Atascosa that's right by the arroyo, and it's just unbelievable. So, but we asked him about it, and he said he would set up a special field trip to that place for you guys, and we'll keep you posted.
How do you get there if it's way in there? Do we walk all that way or what? Or you ride a van or what?
No.
So what we will do is we meet at the visitor center at Laguna Tascosa.
Mm-hmm.
We will carpool, basically following each other, and Mark kind of knows the way. So if there's a gate to be unlocked, he'll unlock it and let us all through. So we're basically following each other. Now there's a place that we get to where we can't drive any further.
I see.
So at that point, you're putting on your boots, your snake boots, you're bringing your water, you're bringing anything else that you need. We're helping Mark carry his nets, his poles, all his gear, and we're trudging across the Laguna Tascosa to get to the place where these birds are. So there is a spot where there is no vehicle access, and that's part of the adventure. That's the part that we have to walk through. You know, pretend you discovered this place for the first time and you're walking through it, and some days half of it is flooded because of the tide, and you're walking through ankle deep water, trying not to slip and fall, because we will all make fun of you if you fall and get yourself all muddy. And then you make it to the other side. There's some places where the brush is just ankle deep. There's other places where the brush is knee high. And then all of a sudden, when you start marching, you got to keep up with everybody else. You cannot break the line, because those little birds, if they see a gap between us, they fly and get out of the way. And so they're really smart birds. So we form up this line, and you got to move quickly, yelling and screaming and shouting to scare these little birds out of the low brush and into the net. And boy,
Wow.
it's a workout. It's a real workout. And again, Mark is a really great guy. He doesn't let everybody go help out with something like this. And he's definitely allowed us to do it, which is going to be really fun. And we lose about half of the class every time we do it, but that's okay.
We've never been able to offer this to a class. That's why
Is
you can
he
say
the
that.
one that's doing the bird banding at the Cactus Creek Ranch?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And if some of you got to hear Mark speak at WowWee, he's just a really cool guy. He's really fun.
I know I didn't get to hear it.
Yeah. He teaches science at one of the high schools in Harlingen.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, Mark Conley. But you're not screaming and yelling. You're clapping and yelling, and Robert made it seem like we were just running around like banshees or something, but it's really different. It's nothing like the other kind of bird banding where you go and you're quiet, and then they fly into the nets, and then you have to go get them out. This way you're driving them from the mangroves towards the mist net, and
trying to step over the rattlesnakes like Barbara did one time.
Yeah, I almost stepped on a rattlesnake out there.
Really?
But that's okay. I've almost stepped on rattlesnakes numerous times. My grandparents had a ranch in New Mexico, and so I spent every summer there for 16 years. So I don't like rattlesnakes, and I commented to Dr. Tibbetts that I was certainly glad that the ones that I've encountered over my life rattled and weren't quiet like the ones he was talking about, because I've never encountered one that didn't rattle. But I guess when I was younger, they scared me a lot more than now. I'm not wanting to touch one or anything, but you just have to keep your eyes peeled. Okay, folks, any last words of wisdom, concern? If not, I will see some of you in the morning. Oh, yes.
Oh, one last thing. I wanted to point out that somebody had posted a question. Let's see, where was it?
Can we get film on the 5 o'clock news?
Oh, I'm not sure what that one was.
That
Oh.
was
Oh.
just me, and it was about running through the field trying to scare
Oh.
birds.
Oh, yeah. That's
This is what Texas bastard naturalists do for fun.
do. Oh, and in fact, Channel 5 Christian von Pricing did go through our class. He's one of our members. Penny just let y'all know that if anyone from the Rio Hondo area would like to ride with us, let us know. And there's her email.
Oh,
Thanks, Penny,
Victoria.
as always.
Victoria posted a question. Does anybody have any suggestions on an animal or mascot for the shirt design for our class? So if any of you are interested in that, you can follow up with Victoria, and maybe a group of you can think about what that shirt design might look like.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. Enjoy the extra 11 minutes you get of your evening. But this count the full time. You don't have to put 10 minutes less.
Okay.
And thank you all for being here. And like I said, I'll see some of you tomorrow. And I'm planning on bringing t-shirts with me. The lady that has part of them is supposed to meet me at Ramsey in the morning. And then, so I'll have t-shirts, and then I'll have them on Saturday as well. So we'll start getting you your t-shirts. So
Are we supposed to buy those on Saturday or what?
no, these are part of your registration.
Oh, okay.
No. In the future, we'll offer things for sale, but these you've already paid for, or
Okay.
we're giving them to you out of our inventory. So
Okay, so then on Saturday when we go, that's where we'll get them from you.
oh,
Okay.
and I think I owe you a book too, and it's in my
You
car.
wanted to exchange a book, right?
Yes,
So you want me to take the book with me then?
that'd be great. I'm glad you brought
Okay.
that. Your book is in my car, so
Okay, that's fine.
thanks, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.